In a world without Roe, Americans would not only be denied health care services they are entitled to, it is possible that some will be prosecuted. Far-right lawmakers have been feverishly anticipating this moment. Over the past week, some of these same officials have introduced legislation around the country designed to punish women for making the basic decisions about reproductive health. State legislators in Louisiana introduced a bill to allow prosecutors to bring murder charges against a woman who undergoes or anyone who provides an abortion. The same Louisiana bill would seemingly call into question the legality of in vitro fertilization, as well as IUDs, the morning after pill, and other forms of emergency contraception. I'm glad I was on the floor a few minutes ago. My colleague, Senator Duckworth, talked about her two little girls, cutest kids you can imagine. I remember those kids from the earliest time. When I was in a car driving in the state of Illinois to an event in Bloomington, the phone rang and it was Tammy Duckworth. She was my colleague in the United States Senate, and she was going to be my colleague in the United States Senate. She was a member of the House of Representatives, and she told me that she was going to have a baby. I couldn't believe it. Tammy and I had known one another since a few weeks after her fatal crash, I should say, terrible crash of the helicopter in Iraq. And I had known what she had gone through, the surgeries and recovery, and I was the one who encouraged her to run for office, and I'm sure glad I did. She has become the voice of the military, the voice of veterans, and one of the most powerful voices in the United States Senate. And when she told the story about those two little girls born through the process of in vitro fertilization, it struck home. I'm fortunate enough as a grandfather to have two in vitro grandbabies. I love them to pieces, and I'm thank goodness that there was a science achievement available to help my daughter deliver those beautiful kids. A Republican lawmaker in Idaho said he's open to banning certain forms of birth control if this decision goes forward in the Supreme Court. He wanted to include Plan B emergency contraception and IUDs. Think about that. State by state, legislator by legislator, will decide what's acceptable when it comes to contraception. Now, some people are going to think, Durbin, you're exaggerating. Democrats are at it again, exaggerating. But I'm old enough to remember before Griswold, the regulation of contraception in those days, when it was virtually, in many states, even illegal to buy a condom. And so you think I'm exaggerating? We lived at that time. And it wasn't until Griswold versus Connecticut, decided by the Supreme Court, that established a right of privacy under our Constitution, which then led to Roe versus Wade. That was America. It was an America which sadly many Republican lawmakers long for. A lawmaker in Missouri introduced a bill that deputizes bounty hunters to sue anyone who helps a woman seeking an abortion outside the state of Missouri. And I wanted to remind my colleague from Texas who spoke just before me, it was the Texas bounty hunters law that started this conversation in earnest. In Texas, they decided that there would be a civil penalty that could be charged against those who were engaged in an abortion, and that a person could claim that penalty if they disclosed it to the public. Just a few days ago, incidentally, the Republican leader in this body, Senator McConnell of Kentucky, said that a national ban on abortion could be, quote, possible, close quote, a national ban if Roe is overturned and the Republicans take control of the Senate. Leaving it up to each state to decide a woman's reproductive rights is to create a patchwork quilt of uncertainty. Your constitutional rights would depend on your zip code, but that is exactly the future we're facing. To be sure, Democratic state legislatures will continue to protect access to abortion, unless, of course, Republicans in Congress enact the national ban that Senator McConnell said was possible. In the absence of a national ban, if you can afford to travel, you'll be able to access reproductive care in states like Illinois and Connecticut. But what about anyone else? If the right to have an abortion now depends on where you live or how much money you make, millions of women, many from historically marginalized communities, will face even greater hurdles in obtaining an abortion. America already has one of the worst maternal mortality rates in the developed world. Drastically restricting access to abortion or banning abortion altogether will make those rates worse. Republicans and anti-choice activists are trying to minimize the impact that erasing Roe would have. They talk about other times the Supreme Court's overturned precedent, and they argue, disingenuously, I think, that this is how the court has always worked. It corrects its own past mistakes. They claim that overturning Roe is no different than the Supreme Court overturning Plessy versus Ferguson, the decision which gave us the odious fiction of separate but equal, and was later overturned by Brown versus the Board of Education. But there is a profound difference. It appears that never before in the history of America has a Supreme Court decision abandoned settled law that made Americans less free. Never. In the past, when the court has taken the serious step of overturning settled law, it has done so to expand freedom, expand opportunity, not eliminate it. What the activist, anti-choice majority on this court would do is unprecedented, radical, and dangerous. Here's another fact that Republican lawmakers are hoping you won't notice. It's not just the right to abortion that is in jeopardy. Justice Alito's draft opinion in the Dobbs case questions the very existence of the right to privacy. It argues that enumerated rights, that is, rights not explicitly mentioned in the Constitution, unenumerated rights not explicitly mentioned in the Constitution, must be deeply rooted in U.S. history and tradition in order to be recognized as a constitutional right. Who decides what is deeply rooted in history and tradition? The court's Obergefell versus Hodges decision established marriage equality only 7 years ago. Will the court's reactionary majority put that next on the chopping block? What about the right to contraception, as I mentioned before, established by Griswold versus Connecticut 11 years before Roe? A Republican member of this body recently criticized that decision, establishing the privacy right of every individual to choose the contraceptions right for their family. He described this as, quote, constitutionally unsound. Rather than settling the debate on abortion, the draft Dobbs opinion would further divide our fractious nation, set the stage for a radical majority on the court to erase even more constitutional rights. It would give government the power to dictate your rights and dictate your future. That's why we must take action to protect women's productive rights. Tomorrow, the Senate will vote on the Women's Health Protection Act. This bill will codify the right to provide or obtain an abortion free from medically unnecessary restrictions. The American people deserve to know where their senators stand. I will not stop fighting for the right of every American, especially the women of America, to have these rights as established for over 50 years. For years, the Republicans claimed they're a party for families, the party of family values. Yet they've spent decades ignoring the needs of working families. Republicans are willing to force women to carry unwanted or unexpected or even dangerous pregnancies to term, but they're not willing to help them raise their children. There are aspects of our voting patterns in the Senate that make it clear that when it comes to helping families, with basics such as tax credits for children, making sure that families have paid medical leave for their newborns or other family members, all of these things are family-friendly and family values. Unfortunately, they're not supported by many, if any, Republicans. That would be a demonstration that they truly care for families. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. And while you're at it, please leave us a comment. Thank you for watching.